have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It is the 16th of May, 2020. As we are back in the saddle, documenting the crisis of our republic, navigating this crazy world in which we live and all of the totalitarian control being put into place by local governments, state governments, governors, and would-be dictators. We are still very much locked down here in Michigan, although you wouldn't know it if you were me, because I don't think I've stayed home a single day of this thing, and nor do I intend to. I'm working every day and doing everything around, and I think more and more Americans are starting to catch on that this thing is never going to end, and so they've given up. They've shrugged. They said, so much for compliance. We're going to do what we need to do. We're going to visit our family. We're going to visit our friends. We're going to do what we can. So any semblance that this thing was a lockdown that's actually going to squash the coronavirus is, if there were any need for that, it's going to be ineffective anyway from the standpoint of those implementing the lockdowns. So what's the point? It's not about lockdowns. It's not about stopping any virus, folks. It's about control. Because if they wanted to stop a virus, the best way to stop the virus is allow people's antibodies to work up against them. And you have to be exposed to it in order for that to happen. And yeah, is there a risk that you might become exceptionally sick? Yeah, there's always that risk. But there's also a risk you might get hit by a car when you walk outside your front door. There's a risk you might get shot. You know, things happen. This is a dangerous world. But you know what? Here's the thing. If your heart is right with the Lord, and I'm not trying to make this into a religious show, but it dawned on me, I think a lot of the reason why a lot of these people on the left are so scared, are so afraid of dying. Oh my gosh, if I get a virus, I might die. It's because their heart isn't right. They're not ready. They don't know where they're going when they leave this world. So it's just something to think about. I'm not going to get preachy, but it's just something to think about. Hey, good morning, Vicky.
Good morning.
You know, when you have your house in order.
I agree with you on what this is about. It's about implementing a control system. It's not about some stinking virus.
No, I mean, the viruses have been around forever, and they always will be, although I do think this one was manufactured. And, we've got the government, though, out of control with the spending. They're talking about another stimulus bill yet again. This one's a $3 trillion stimulus bill, and 1,800 pages. Now, can you imagine how many things could be in a stimulus bill that's 1,800 pages?
Well, you know what?
bailouts.
They have to keep doing that. I watched that 2008, the documentary on the 2008 meltdown, and with what we know about the globalization of the economic system, they have to keep pumping money into it because the people at the top who are making all the money, they just keep soaking up the money, and the people at the bottom are living on the crumbs and scraps. And that doesn't work. You can't have an economy that way.
The problem is it's not sustainable. At some point, there's going. I understand, but it is a legitimate word in certain instances. You can't continue to do this, and without consequences in the long term. Now, in the short term, you may be able to give people money in the short term and make them happy and make them go away or stay off your back or whatever. But in the long term, everything's going to crash. I mean, you can't continue to go on this way. And how many years have they been going on this way? Ever since I can remember. Since we've been talking about this, but in recent years, it's gotten much, much worse. I mean, the amount of money that they're throwing around now is just astronomical. I mean, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars, and it's just, where's this money coming from? Are they printing it? Well, it's inflationary if they're printing it. Is this something that they're just taking out of the economy? I hear a lot about
up out of thin air. I think it's just
financial terms.
It's just thin air because intellectual work, the so-called knowledge economy, doesn't really generate any. There's no production to it, and it's not. The income from it is not something that can be distributed widely, even though they pretend that the distributed sales using the internet is a means of wealth for the majority. It isn't. Every single time, like they took down Alex Jones, there will be another king that rises. It's just the nature of the beast. To have one central hub. That's the nature of computer systems.
Yeah, and everything they're doing here is based upon networks, computer systems, and a technocratic control grid. I mean, that's for sure. And the whole idea of the neoliberal economy, as they described in the that documentary that we shared on globalization, it was never a workable thing, and yet you had all these people out there saying free trade, free trade, free trade, and how great it was, and eliminate government. We don't need no stinking government, and all of the things that were embedded in the neoliberal philosophy was psychopathic for anybody who stopped to analyze it and extrapolate what it means throughout the economy. But all of these free traders, they were thinking only of their own situation. And if it fit their own situation, it's great, it's perfect for the entire world. But it isn't. Do you think they're going to admit they're wrong and come out and say, I think this whole thing, we had it wrong, we made a mistake, and reverse course?
No, but I think that's what Trump's marketing message was.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got to start including
what?
The people who were left behind.
Yeah.
Which is, the vast majority of the country.
Yeah, well, duh.
But he doesn't. But
of the people, by the people, for the people.
He talks but doesn't deliver. He's a marketing guy.
Yes, and that was what I was going to say. Is he's very good at getting the talk right. I mean, he is able to push people's buttons, But when it comes down to delivering upon his message, that's the real problem. Because even today, I mean, you sent me that clip yesterday. You know, he was interviewed by Fox's News' Maria Bartiromo, or whatever her name is.
Bartiromo?
Yeah, that. And you know, he's sounding really good. Everything he's saying in there is really good. Well, not everything, because he did say he's mobilizing the military to promote vaccines. Right. That's a problematic. I got some clips from that interview too, but yeah, I mean, he sounds really good with what he says, but I think it's much more important to not just sound right. You have to actually be able to deliver, or at least try to deliver, not make compromises that are the exact opposite of what you claimed that you were standing for. And I come back to the USMCA, you know, because for all the talk about building a border wall, and for all the talk about bringing everything, the industries, the business, home, and then you claim you're changing policies. When you sign, and he signed that agreement, the USMCA, and
right, and it's NAFTA. It is NAFTA. He says that he ripped up NAFTA. The hell he did. It's USMCA.
The Council on Foreign Relations lady, we played it on the show. She said it leaves NAFTA in place and adds the TPP, elements of the TPP.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that is, I mean, I haven't read it. It's a big agreement, and a lot of it, you probably almost have to be a lawyer to understand it. You know, it's very technical because it deals with, I mean, some of it you can understand. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from reading it. But the point is that it's a very technical agreement. But the bottom line is this woman was an expert on it. And she was on the Council on Foreign Relations panel about this very topic. And she said it leaves in place most of the provisions of NAFTA. Now, they have a little piece here and there that they can throw, you know, auto parts and this, that, a certain percentage have to be made in the United States or whatever. I mean, these are little bones for the base.
That is central planning, by the way. If you distribute economic activity, it has to be planned, you know, and like the percentage of parts that have to be produced in the United States, that is central planning because globalization doesn't work.
Yeah, well, I mentioned this before on the show. I used to be a UAW representative back when I worked at WILX TV, okay? And we negotiated a contract. And the contract, that was actually the contract that the last contract before I left. And it was a grueling process. It was very educational. It was the only time I had ever done something like that, and it was like I say, it was very educational, but it was excruciating because you know you're making decisions not just for yourself but for everybody else, and so and people get upset when they don't. I mean, negotiation is about compromise. You have to give a little and hopefully get some in return, which the company isn't always very willing to give up ground. But the point is that in this process, you also, after you get a tentative agreement, you take it to your membership, and you have to sell that to them. You have to make it something that, I mean, they're going to want to ratify, because they're the ones that have the say. Because if they don't ratify it, then you got to go back to the table and figure something else out. And so there's certain points, certain things in there that you think are especially good, that are good for the membership, that you point to and you say, "Hey, look here, this is a thing we got for you." You know, you point out what you think are the positives, and you know maybe the things that are not so great, you kind of not so much. But anyway, the point is that that's exactly what they're doing with this USMCA agreement. They're pointing to a few things they put in there, I think, specifically so they could sell it, and ignore the rest of it, which is exactly, it's not only status quo, but it's even worse than the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah, because it extends the borderless United States for commerce.
Right. To the Pacific Ring.
Right. And so I will never forgive Trump for that, because he said he would get us out of NAFTA, and just giving an agreement a new name. That's the thing in our country, is that people seem to be fooled by new names.
Well, and more than that even, Vicky, they're fooled by personalities. And this is the thing that drives me bonkers. If somebody's got charisma, if somebody has a personality that they like, the conservatives love Trump because he stands up to all these media outlets, these scumbags who are lying sacks of manure. I'm sorry, but they are. And they lie every day, and he gets up there and points the finger at them and says, you're fake news. Basically, all of his supporters are living vicariously through him, because every single person in the United States who is a conservative wants to be able to stand up, get in Jim Acosta's face and point the finger and say, you're a scumbag. You know? And people like Acosta.
Yeah, you're right.
And so they love him for that. But the problem is, he's selling you down the road. So, you know...
We're a nation of superficial thinkers, and what a shame that is.
Unfortunately,
what a shame that is.
Unfortunately, but these bills and this spending that's going on in Washington D.C. right now, you know, $3 trillion, and the Democrats are talking about releasing convicted criminals onto the streets. There's some that they've already released. There's one sheriff that actually said that, I'm not going to enforce the governor's executive orders because I'm too busy rearresting the criminals they let loose.
Right.
You know,
who would have thought that?
Yeah, we lock people up for a reason, people. You know, and we're going to turn around and turn them loose because, well, they might catch something and when they're in jail. Okay, but what about society? I mean, society might catch something. It's called a serious crime. And they always stress, well, they're nonviolent offenders. And I hear more and more about this. Oh, nonviolent offenders. Yeah, but nonviolent offenders are still offenders, assuming that they were really rightfully convicted. I mean, if somebody's breaking in your house, they might be a nonviolent offender. But I don't want somebody breaking in my house. You might go out to your driveway and find your car gone. Hey, it was a nonviolent offender.
Right.
I mean, this is just like Derry Brownfield used to call it, ignorance gone to seed. You know.
Oh, what a depressing thought that is.
Yeah. Well, anyway, H.R. 6800, that's the latest socialist spending thing from Nancy Pelosi and company. And, you know, they're calling it dead on arrival. But I don't think it's dead on arrival at all. I think what's going to happen is the Republicans haven't put enough of their stuff in it yet. And so they'll wrangle around a little bit with it and argue and probably add another 1,000 pages to it. And then they'll say, hey, perfect.
Another half a
Send it to the president, and the president will sign it. You remember the first time he signed that massive $1 trillion bill, budget bill? Now, you know, you don't even hear about a budget anymore. Shouldn't we have had a budget bill by now?
They're supposed to do a budget every couple of years or so.
And they don't call it a budget. They call it a spending bill. But regardless, all we got is spending bills now, our spending bills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what? I noticed I was looking at a piece of legislation called the Global Pollution Act of 1990, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And it was, when it was introduced as a
as a what?
But somehow magically that legislation as a standalone didn't go anywhere, but it was included in an appropriations bill. So they appropriated the money for it. They put the rules for how it would be spent inside the appropriations bill. Now, that's not my understanding of how Congress should be working.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are not working properly, that's for sure. We had another protests this week. Seems like we have them nearly every week now. It's been kind of averaging every other week. This one was kind of interesting. Well, aside from the fact that it was pouring rain, I got there I was there early, It was probably about 5 minutes before it started. I didn't think very many people were going to show up because there weren't anywhere near the number of people that had been there in past protests. I found out later, at least they said up from the platform, that there had been roads closed. I took a different way in than I normally do. And there were, I guess, roads closed, and some people were, speculating that maybe that there could have been roads closed to try to keep people away from the protests. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but whatever the case, there were a whole lot of people that were late. And I ended up, I was up in the front like I always am, and live streaming it on Periscope. And I found out that, during the course, and it was pouring rain. I mean, it was worse than it had been in the past. And so it was pretty miserable. But there was a brawl that broke out right next to me. There were apparently some provocateurs, or a provocateur in the crowd. I don't know what this person's motivation was, but I don't think it was very pure. I really kind of think it may very well have been somebody from the other side coming in and trying to make everybody look bad. Because what they did, among other things, I heard that the signage they were carrying was kind of vulgar, but they were also carrying a doll which looked like Governor Whitmer, and the doll wasn't wearing any clothes, and it had a rope around its neck, and it was hanging there. So, this is a peaceful
I would
protest.
say that was a paid insurgent.
Yes, and so consequently, this person was confronted by the people that were there, and anyway, the whole thing ended up turning out into a scuffle. And I'm not quite sure what all happened, because by the time I noticed it was going on, well, the first thing I noticed was there were people running down the Capitol steps, and there was some shouting. So that's when I panned over to get a shot of what was going on, and there was some pushing going on and some tugging on a flag, and then I got an umbrella in the face, so I had to try to get out of the way. I had my phone plugged into a battery so the battery wouldn't go dead, and my cable got tangled up with somebody else's stuff, and the battery went flying onto the Capitol steps. So I was occupied with trying to get my battery, and so you never know what's going to happen with one of these things. But normally it's very peaceful. This time it turned out to be quite an interesting ordeal, but. And what's weird about it is the police were nowhere to be found. It took a long time. They were shouting for the Capitol Police to come out. Eventually they did, but it took a long time for the police, because they kept saying, "Cops, where are you? Where are you? Capitol Police, we got an incident here." And anyway, you can hear all that on the recording of the Periscope stream, but that's at periscope.tv/governamerica. But yeah, it was very interesting, to say the least. And but I think what it is, I do think that it was a shill going in there, because, see, this is the thing. They have been pushing forward memes about us. Those of us who have gone to these protests, they're saying things like we're racist. And I think I figured out what the basis of this is, Vicky. They're claiming that people are racist for going to these protests, and then they're lumping everybody together. Now, there may have been some Nazi swastika. I didn't see any of it. Now, I want to make that very clear. I didn't see anything like that. What I saw are pictures of Governor Whitmer with a Hitler mustache. I've seen things like that. And so what I think is happening, or has happened, is people are using certain things, certain signage, to reference her as a totalitarian. And she's taking it, and the other side is taking it and twisting it and saying that, oh, well, see there, that proves they're racists. Because
I think you're probably right.
Because
I think you're probably right about
anybody
that.
who's trying to get a message across would have to know that this is going to spoil your message. If you're trying to win people over, which is what you kind of do in a protest, the last thing you want to do is alienate people. But she's using this and twisting it and trying to say that people are racist. She went on The View and said that. So she's and by the way, once again, for somebody who's purportedly trying to do the best she can for Michigan, here she goes making more public appearances. How about you make a little less appearances publicly on a national stage, Governor Whitmer? And how about you focus a little more on the state?
What I don't understand about public figures doing this is, why do you want to alienate half of the population? If you call me a Nazi or a racist, or that I'm not, you've made an enemy. I am now your enemy.
Yeah.
Because I have to fight against that kind of accusation. So why do these public officials do that? I think they're doing it intentionally to
divide and conquer.
Because I do think they're working towards breaking up the United States into regions.
Absolutely. Yeah, divide and conquer. That's what it's all about. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour already. We just blew through that half hour. When we come back, we'll hit the ground running. Lots of information to share today. Stay with us, folks. This is Govern America. Don't go away.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Govern America. Darren Weeks here, and Vicky Davis. The website for the show is governamerica.com. Governamerica.com. My email address is radio@governamerica.com. Go ahead, Vicky, give your information out, please.
Okay, my website is thetechnocratictyranny.com. My older website has a lot of research, is channelingreality.com, and my email address is eyeswideoopen at channelingreality.com.
All right, very good. We have
and that's it.
We just had an arrest of an Ohio professor. This is interesting because we've been warning people for years about the fact that the communist Chinese have been sending people over to our country to spy. And I'm not saying this guy was a spy, and everybody is presumed innocent until proven guilty. At least that's the way the American justice system is supposed to work. I'm not sure it always does work that way. But anyway, this Ohio professor, this is a Case Western Reserve University professor. He's been arrested over his alleged ties to China. The professor is just the latest in a growing list of U.S. college faculty to face these types of charges. They say in Campus Reform, a Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine professor and former Cleveland Clinic employee was arrested Wednesday over his alleged ties to China. The Justice Department announced that King Wang, that's Qingwang, was arrested at his Shaker Heights, Ohio home as part of a joint operation conducted by the FBI and the Department of Health and Human Services Office of the Inspector General. Wang was charged with wire fraud related to more than $3.6 million in grant funding that Wang and his research team at the Cleveland Clinic had received from the National Institutes of Health. According to the criminal complaint, Wang filed to disclose affiliations with Chinese universities. He also allegedly failed to disclose that he had received grants from the National Natural Science Foundation of China for a nearly identical research project, Vicky. He held the title Dean of the College of Life Sciences and Technology at Huazhong University of Science and Technology. Cleveland Special Agent in Charge Eric Smith said this wasn't a simple case of omission. adding that Wang deliberately failed to disclose his Chinese grants and foreign positions and even engaged in a pervasive pattern of fraud to avoid criminal culpability. Wang served on the staff of the Lerner Research Institute, a research arm of the world-renowned Cleveland Clinic. Campus Reform found that Wang also held a professorship at CWRU's School of Medicine, where he was involved with its Department of Molecular Medicine, Genetics, and Genome Sciences, and its Division of General Medical Sciences. He was a member of the Comprehensive Cancer Center, located at the Cleveland, Ohio University. Now, this is interesting to me because we know that China has gotten ahead by stealing different research and information from the United States. And I'm not saying that that's what's going on here. That will be for the prosecutors and the juries and, the entire justice system to figure out, and hopefully accurately. But this, I think, really is speaking on a broader, more wider perspective here. I think this is a lot of these types of things are the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, it is.
I think that there's going to be...
Because the system of shared research and transfer of technology, which in intellectual property was the point of transfer of technology, that was intentional. And if this guy's lawyer knows where to look, his defense is in the policy of the United States, policy and law and grants in the United States government.
Yeah.
So he was doing the system to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, the whole UN globalist system, like you say, it's just a setup. That's something that's in Agenda 21 too. Technology transfer, and all the wealthy countries are supposed to give to the. It's socialism. All the wealthy countries are supposed to give everything they have to the lesser advantaged countries or the developing countries.
Right, to bring them online.
Yes.
Which means building their infrastructure and turning their major cities in even the poor countries into global cities.
Now, American military...
that's the design of the global system. Now, when our government, when the officials in our government talk about globalization, they talk about it as if it's a natural occurrence, as if it was an evolving kind of thing that just kind of accidentally happened, which is absolutely not true.
American military news... They go a little deeper into this. They say a former Cleveland Clinic researcher who received more than $3.6 million in National Institute of Health grants is facing criminal charges for failing to disclose his ties to Chinese universities and his connections to a Chinese government program described as a conduit. Here's the important thing here. Described as a conduit for theft of U.S. intellectual property. The FBI and officials from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Inspector General's office arrested Dr. King Wang on Wednesday at his home. Prosecutors say Wang appeared Thursday before Magistrate Judge Jonathan Greenberg, who released him on a $100,000 bond and required him to surrender his passports and restrict his travels to northern Ohio. A criminal complaint released to reporters on Thursday says Wang faces charges of false claims and wire fraud. Of course, he asserts his innocence. The statement from his lawyer says Dr. Wang is a citizen of the United States. As we all know, being presumed innocent is a legal right enjoyed by our citizens. The burden of proving his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt rests entirely on the government. We respectfully request that he and his family be treated with respect during this process. The complaint says Wang knowingly failed to tell the NIH he held the position of the Dean of the College of Life Sciences and Technology. Here's the part. Investigators also allege that Wang participated in the 1,000 Talents program, which the Chinese government established to recruit people with access to or knowledge of foreign technology and intellectual property. China provided Wang with $3 million in research support for his lab in China. It also gave him free travel and lodging for his trips to China, including a 3-bedroom apartment campus for his personal use, authorities said. This occurred while Wang was receiving NIH grant money without disclosing his ties to China. So, anyway, he failed to disclose, but the point is that it sounds like if he's guilty, okay, and I will put that caveat in there, but it sounds like he was essentially a spy for China. That's what it sounds like to me, and that's my opinion. I'm not stating it as a fact, and again, he is innocent until proven guilty. But if he is guilty, he's trying to absorb technology and take it back to the homeland, to the motherland, you know. But we've been telling people for years this is going on, and now I'm glad to see, better late than never, I suppose. But it's nice to see that finally somebody in government is actually paying attention to the threat that China represents. You got to wonder why it took so long. Well, I don't think I have to wonder at all. I think too many people were making a lot of money off of it. So they just wanted to look the other way. The
design of the global economy as a whole was intended to share technology, to bring everybody up to the 21st century. And the network between researchers at universities was implemented to share knowledge. Mm-hmm. That's what the Human Genome Project was. Yeah. And the database was for genome information was at Johns Hopkins University.
Yeah, Spook Central.
And they moved it up to, they supposedly shut it down and moved it up to Toronto, Canada. But the whole idea was to share knowledge as if we were just one great big human family. Yeah. And everybody has good intentions, no malice in their heart. I mean, it was just so delusional.
Why would anyone want to have malice?
It's unbelievable that they actually thought that.
Well, that's what you got to believe when you're a globalist. But the thing is that, all this, we're all a global community, and we're all, our global neighborhood. Wasn't that the name of the book?
I think it was malevolent. I think it was malevolent from the beginning because anybody with half a brain can figure out that not everybody is our friend. Even in your own life, not everybody that you know is your friend.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to believe that on a global scale it's any different. We know it's not different.
Well,
so when they set up this network, I think it was malevolent, and it was done as a population reduction thing.
No question about it. And another group of people that are not our friend is Google. Google now is under fire. The Justice Department and the state attorneys general are likely to bring antitrust lawsuits against Google, we're being told now by the Wall Street Journal. I'm not going to go deeply into that. I just wanted to put it on the record as a note for people. But they're talking about bringing charges against Google over, mainly it's over their ad network. I guess they're controlling too much of the ad network market. But I'd love to see the Justice Department bring all these big tech companies up on charges, because they should be forced to choose whether they're a platform for publishing, where they can, are they a publisher or are they a forum? The law protects them if they're, a forum where they can allow people to post, because they can't control that. But they're editing things, taking things down. It is insane the degree to which the censorship is going on right now. I'm hearing a lot from people who are on Facebook where pages are taking down.
They've stolen a lot of money from a lot of people. People went out and they worked hard and they built up a following for their videos. they were making money, and then all of a sudden they get taken down. Well, that's theft. That's theft of their property, theft of their business.
Well,
And,
I don't think you put your eggs all in one basket anyway. My big beef, if you do that, that's very unwise to build your whole life on. I understand people that have done it and made it big and have later come to regret it, but you got to be real careful about putting all your eggs in one basket, especially when it comes to your livelihood.
You're right. People didn't understand that, but it will always be that way with the internet because, like I said, it's the nature of the beast. You don't change the nature of the beast just because it doesn't work for your delusional idea of how globalization should work.
Well, my big problem with it, though, is the censorship of speech, because in many respects, these social, social media companies, they're supposed to be, they're kind of become the new town square, where people talk, people meet, people sort of get together in a virtual sort of way anyway, and yet they're dictating, they're censoring things in such a way that people, it's all official narrative. You can't have a discussion if somebody gets too big. I know YouTube will they sometimes will kind of leave you alone until your video gets a lot of views. Once it starts taking off, that's when they target it. And then next thing you know, a lot of these accounts, they'll attack one video and then it's like a chain reaction. You get 3 strikes, you're out. They just cancel your channel. Okay, so there have been videos that have been there forever, never had any problem, but one video gets popular and then it spills over into other videos. Next thing you know, boom, boom, boom. There's your 3 strikes, you're out. And your channel's gone. And all your work, if you haven't backed it up somewhere. So they're dictating what people can say and what they can't say. And it's just like we had that video marked private, forcefully marked private. So essentially taken down, even though it wasn't really taken down, nobody could see it unless they knew the URL. And only because Eric Charamella was in the description of the show. The name. And why would they want to ban that? Because the intelligence establishment wanted it banned. You're not allowed to say the name. So that's how crazy this thing has gotten. We know that turning a corner here, trying to keep I'm watching the clock. We're told now we have a meat shortage, Vicky. We're told that these plants have to shut down. We know that the farmers, the ranchers out west have no place to take their meat to the slaughter. And so consequently, herds have been being culled, I guess, and because they can't afford to keep feeding them, these cows and stuff every day. Because, they take them to the feedlots. It's expensive. It's an expensive process, and at some point you got to take them to the slaughter. And when the processing plants are closed down, there's no place to take them. So in the midst of this apparent meat shortage, now we find out the headline, myhighplains.com, U.S. meat exports surge as industry struggles to meet demand. This is an Associated Press article. Dateline
exports surge?
Omaha, Nebraska. U.S. meat exports are surging even as the industry is struggling to meet domestic demand because of coronavirus outbreaks at processing plants that have sickened hundreds of workers and caused companies to scramble to improve conditions.
Are they exporting the live cattle?
No, I assume it's post-processed meat.
Well,
I guess.
How can that be? If
I don't know.
Domestic producers can't get their beef slaughtered and to market, how could Omaha be surging with exports when?
I don't know. Although the situation could cause concern that American workers are risking their health to meet foreign demand, experts say it shouldn't be. It shouldn't because much of the meat sold to other countries is cuts that Americans generally don't eat. That's what they're claiming. And at least one.
I don't know of any cut that Americans don't eat.
Well, it sounds a lot like jobs that Americans won't do.
Except the guts. I mean, people, except for the liver and the heart, people eat that. But
Yeah, well, there's jobs that Americans won't do, too, right?
They even eat the stomach. What am I saying? What is tripe?
I have no idea.
Isn't that,
I don't know what they're talking about.
Isn't that the intestines?
Oh, yeah,
maybe that's pig. I don't know.
You know what this reminds me of, though, is the Irish potato famine. They were, I grew up, I always had assumed that people were starving during the Irish potato famine because there wasn't enough food. And come to find out, as I get a little older and read more about it, it turns out there was plenty of food. They were exporting it.
Yeah.
People could have eaten, but they were exporting it. And so they were letting their own people starve. I think
that's what happened to the people in the Ukraine for that famine as well. They took all the Ukraine was the breadbasket, and they made the farmers give up all of their production. And they didn't have enough food for their own people. So
they say if companies manage to keep their workers healthy and plants operating, there should be plenty of supply to satisfy domestic and foreign markets, according to industry officials. Quote, I really feel like the industry is well positioned to serve all of its customers, both here and abroad. Well, I don't know. That's Joel Scheel, a spokesman for the industry trade group, Meat Export Federation. But the problem is when the prices are soaring, you either have a huge increase in demand or a much less supply, so or both, and the prices are soaring. So you got to ask yourself the question: what's going on here? And I don't know how much of this. My take on this whole processing plant shortage. Why don't they get the National Guard in there? If they want to use the National Guard for peaceful purposes, send them to these plants. If you have to do that in order to keep them going, do what you got to do. But the food supply has got to continue. Go ahead.
All of the processing should not be located in one place anyway. I mean, that is just an outrage that they've centralized. Here we go again, centralization. And I'm sure that was driven by the EPA because of the hazardous waste output. It should not all be in one place. And you know what I did last week? I went to the store and I was going to get some meat. And I looked at the cuts of meat, like round steak and things like that. It was glistening. It didn't look right. And so I didn't buy that, but I bought this big package of hamburger that I was going to break up into smaller packages and put in the freezer. Well, a day or two later, I saw a story about slime, slime on the meat.
Pink slime.
Yeah. And,
we talked about that years ago.
And I was thinking, thank God I didn't buy that meat, it just didn't look right.
Well, here's
so
the thing.
I threw out all the hamburger. I threw it away because I'm afraid to eat it. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, it's best if you could buy it from your local farmer's market. If you can get a hold of that, that's probably the best meat. But the thing is that we know, we've been talking about it for years. Agenda 21 doesn't want you to eat meat. They want to ban meat consumption. They want to ban really all hoofed animals, is what I hear. And certainly they want to get everybody onto a vegetarian diet because they believe that that's sustainable. And
it serves two purposes because people that are vegans, they're not really very healthy. So
I agree.
There you go.
Everyone that I've seen anyway, they all look pale
two birds
white.
With one stone.
They look pale white. They look like they have pasty skin, and there you go. But that's how they want everybody. They want everybody sickly, and here we come back to the coronavirus. And the vaccines. What's going to be in the vaccines? Just another little note on the side, by the way. Biden apparently is not doing so well. Even CNN is saying battleground states are tilting toward Trump, according to CNN's own poll. Now, isn't that something? Presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden's lead over President Donald Trump now stands at 5 points, but Trump has an edge in the critical battleground states that could decide the Electoral College, according to a new CNN poll conducted by SSRS. So that's fascinating that even CNN is saying that. So for whatever that's worth, apparently you can't rape women and have people think favorably of you.
Huh. Who would have thought?
Because, and I'm referencing the Tara Reid allegation, but, Biden has been creepy.
I got hairy legs.
He's been very, very creepy for a long time. Anyway.
That's true.
We see here from News Punch, 2 new schoolboys collapse and die in China while wearing face masks during physical education class. More stories about people passing out because their oxygen is inadequate in these masks. And I can tell you, the only time I've wore a mask during this whole period of time is Michelle and I had a dumpster hauled in here because we're working to clean the basement out during this time that she's off work. And so it's dusty down there. So I went and, we got some masks, and I was wearing a mask just long enough to be in that dusty environment. And I can tell you, I did not wear that mask for very long because I can't breathe in that. It's very difficult to breathe in these masks. So to consider that they're making it to the point where people have to wear them for extended periods of time, I could see how somebody would pass out. And Chicago, speaking of vaccines and things like that, Chicago's creating an app to pre-register for the coronavirus vaccine. They call it
I want mine. I want to be in line first.
You know what? Here's the thing about it, Vicky. They're going to have a lot of people sign up because that's how stupid people are. People will be lining up because the media has been selling this thing. They've been telling you that the only way you're going to get back to normal, the only way it's ever going to come back is with the vaccine. The vaccine are like the pearly gates to the promised land. The vaccine, that's exactly the way they've been framing this thing. And so I have every reason to believe there's going to be a big line. Everybody's going to beg because that's the way they want it. They want people to beg for their chains. So
I'm speechless. I don't know what to say.
All right, tell you what, we're out of this hour, so we can get our speech back into the next hour. So stay with us, folks. Govern America continues. Don't go away.
Have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is the second hour of Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 16th of May, 2020 as we get right back into it here. I wanted to follow up a little bit on the Chicago Sun-Times story that I ended the last hour with real quickly. Again, the headline is Chicago creates app to pre-register for coronavirus vaccine. They say Chicagoans can now pre-register for a coronavirus vaccine, get text messages, quote, tailored to their symptoms, Vicky, and also receive guidance about where and when to seek medical care by downloading a new web-based app unveiled by City Hall Monday. The Shy COVID Cat, actually, let me start over. It's called the Shy COVID Coach app. Was developed by Google and MTX to help the Chicago Department of Public Health communicate with Chicagoans who have either tested positive for the virus or may be experiencing symptoms. Those who register will get daily check-ins. Daily check-ins on their well-being.
Yay!
You really have to be an idiot to download something like this. They get daily check-ins on their well-being, because, hey, government now is our nanny. They're our caretaker, and so we want to make sure we get our check-ins, as well as they can also get advice about what they and other people in their household should do to limit the spread of the coronavirus.
You know what, how great this is? This is for research. This is having the lab rats self-report.
Here you go. Yeah, exactly. Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady said registration doesn't put you first in line for the vaccine, but will help the city hit the ground running once vaccine finally does become available. Although Lightfoot and Arwady said the coronavirus vaccine is not expected until 2021, both added that they are already mapping plans to vaccinate the entire city by purchasing syringes and other equipment and choosing locations to administer shots. And officials are thinking about technology they'll use to link people's symptoms to test results, vaccination, and ultimately contact tracing. And here we go with the contact tracing. And that's what it's really all about. This thing is going to track people everywhere. People are going to have to keep their Bluetooth beacons turned off. I don't even know if you can do that with an iPhone. Interesting thought. But here we see from the Washington Post, Wisconsin Supreme Court strikes down governor's extension of stay-at-home order. That's good news. It's about time. We need a whole lot more of this. The Wisconsin Supreme Court's conservative majority sided with Republican legislators and struck down on Wednesday the decision by Democratic Governor Tony Evers' administration to extend a stay-at-home order intended to quell the spread of the virus. That's what they claim anyway. The 4-3 decision limits Evers' ability to make statewide rules during emergencies such as a global pandemic, instead requiring him to work with the state legislature on how the state should handle the outbreak. So, good news from Wisconsin. Here we see from 9 News, Dillon police looking for a man. Oh, this is an interesting story. Now, a lot of these stores are requiring, Vicky, people to wear masks when you go in. So this guy came in to a store, and he was wearing a KKK cone head.
Yeah.
He goes into the store,
and
they ask him to leave. They ask him to leave. Now, the article says the cops are looking for this guy, but I don't think he committed any crime. I would argue, now, obviously, if you were a black person, you'd be pretty intimidated to see somebody with a KKK hat on their head. But it's a face mask, and my hunch is this guy is just making a political statement.
I'm positive of it, because nobody would be walking around through the grocery store, picking through the vegetables and fruit with his KKK outfit on.
So, anyway, I'll just leave that there for whatever it's worth. We're seeing a number of states shut down persecute the residents for disobeying. Los Angeles now, well, that's a city, not a state, but they're shutting off the water, power of non-essential businesses that refuse to close amid the coronavirus, which is never ending, just like the war on terror is never ending. So you got all these things going on, and I guess that's about all I wanted to talk about with regard to this. Now, a little bit on the political front. The White House has a new press secretary. I don't know if you've seen any of her press briefings. Her name is...
I watched one or two, but...
Kayleigh McEnany. Now, I think she's really smart. She seems to really control the room really well. She doesn't put up with any flack from them. She had one on a briefing on Tuesday. The last press secretary didn't even have any briefings at all. I think I don't know what was going on there, but I know that was on the heels of the Jim Acosta thing, and where Jim Acosta from CNN, you remember, was trying. He wouldn't quit talking, and so they for a while quit having press briefings. And Trump got heat for walking out of the press briefing room. When the reporters. And I just got to say something about this. Regardless of what you say about Trump, regardless of what you think of Trump, the way he has been treated by the media has been absolutely, it's completely unacceptable. It is. I think any president that wasn't Trump. Had they had that kind of treatment from the press would have been bounced right out of there. But because it's Trump, it's somehow acceptable to interrupt, to refuse to quit talking when you've been told that it's time to quit talking. I just see this breakdown in civility, even at the highest levels. It's like everything now is just acceptable, that you can have bad manners, that you cannot respect the office. If you don't respect the person holding the office, you have to at least respect the office. But they're not respecting the office at all. And this kind of thing, it bothers me greatly. And I've heard people talk about this, well, he just stormed out of that's what they say. He just stormed out of the press briefing room. Well, what's he supposed to do? Stand there when the reporters won't shut up? Is he supposed to just preside over chaos?
Yeah, I think the media people would love that. Jim Acosta probably would love that.
Yeah, well, he's the one that's trying to create a lot of the chaos. And Trump pulled his press credentials. He went to court and got a judge to say, nope, you got to give them back. And that's when the White House quit having press conferences. For a while, they were having him by the helicopter before he flew away. Or the plane.
Well, I don't know why the White House didn't call and say, send somebody else, period. This guy is not welcome in my home.
Well, the media, CNN wouldn't have cooperated with that. And
well, then is Trump, the White House, it's owned by the public, but it's also his home.
Yeah, well,
I didn't, whether or not you allow somebody in your home, I don't know. I think that's arguable.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that a judge would come down on the side that the president can't stop a particular reporter who is clearly adversarial and just there to disrupt. It's one thing to ask questions when you're called upon. But when you're taking a rude, interruptive stance and you don't respect the office of the president, and you're there just causing problems, won't let even your colleagues, that's rude to your colleagues because he just wouldn't quit talking. And that's what we're seeing more and more with these reporters, is that they won't quit talking. They just keep on going. And it's a breakdown of civility. And Trump's left with only one thing, and that's to walk out. And that's what he started doing now, which I think is a brilliant thing because, and he's used that as leverage. He says, look, if you don't quit talking, if you don't stop, I'm just going to leave and you can hash it out with all your colleagues. So, anyway. But this White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, she was at a press briefing on Tuesday, addressed the release of documents from the Adam Schiff and Russia collusion fiasco.
Yep. Chanel? Thank you. With the release of the transcripts related to Adam Schiff's Russia probe this week, is there any information you can share with us as to what the DOJ has shared with the White House on whether it is investigating Obama administration officials on this matter?
So I don't have any updates on that front because that's currently a DOJ matter. But you did refer to transcripts, and I do think it's an important moment to talk about what was in some of the transcripts that were released prior to today, so not the specific ones that you're asking about. But we learned from newly released transcripts a few things. We learned that what some Obama officials were saying publicly was much different than what they were saying privately. James Clapper was out there saying that he had evidence that this was worse than Watergate, when in fact a few weeks later he was saying privately, I never saw any direct empirical evidence that the Trump campaign or someone in it was plotting or conspiring with Russia. Samantha Power said, I am not in possession of anything. I am not in possession and didn't read or absorb any information that came out of the intelligence community suggesting collusion. Ambassador Rice, I don't recall intelligence or evidence to that effect. Former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, I can't say that if it existed or not. I don't recall that being briefed up to me. So it brings the question to light. Why then did we have many years of investigating collusion that these Obama administration officials never existed, they never saw any evidence of, but for 3 years the American people were dragged through the mud and told that their choice for the President of the United States might have been a Russian asset based on no evidence at all. This president was exonerated by the Mueller report, and there are some real questions for these individuals who are saying one thing publicly and another thing privately.
Unfortunately, nothing will ever get done with it, though.
I agree. I don't think there's going to be anything done about anything. The only people that go to jail are people who are at street level, Yeah. And that doesn't make any difference whether they're corporate leaders or whether they're government officials. Corruption doesn't count at the top. There's no such thing as corruption at the top. It's only just silly guys making mistakes,
Yeah, exactly. We mentioned last week that the charges were dropped against General Michael Flynn following the documents that were being released, which proved that the FBI's attempts at entrapping him. Now audio has been leaked this week that brings into question Obama's role in the matter. I'm sure none of us had any question that he was up to his eyeballs in it.
President Trump is weighing in on newly leaked audio, allegedly of a private phone conversation between former President Barack Obama and ex-White House aides. Here's One America's Selena Arredondo.
President Trump is sounding the alarm on what he's calling Obamagate. The matter unraveled Sunday in a string of tweets reposted by President Trump, accusing former President Barack Obama of attempting to sabotage President Trump through persecution of former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn. The allegations stem from leaked audio files circulated online, allegedly capturing Obama during a private phone call last week with former White House staffers. In the audio, you can hear what's believed to be Obama criticizing the DOJ's decision to drop all charges against General Flynn.
Someone who's been charged with perjury. Just getting off scot-free. That's the kind of stuff where you begin to get worried that basic understanding of rule of law.
Okay, first of all, he wasn't ever charged with perjury.
Is at risk.
President Trump has since called the matter, quote, the biggest political crime in American history by far. In another tweet adding, he got caught. Meantime, a federal investigation led by U.S. Attorney John Durham will continue into the origins of the failed Russian collusion probe and whether misconduct under the Obama administration played a role in the matter. Selena Arredondo, One America News.
I'm not sure. Well, let me take that back. I'm not sure that it was a perjury charge. It was lying to the FBI, I believe, is what it was. So I don't. Yeah, technically that would not be perjury.
Right. Perjury is when you
lie in court
swear
or under oath.
An oath to tell the truth.
Yeah. So it wasn't perjury.
If you lie after you swear to tell the truth, that's perjury.
Exactly. So get your facts straight, Obama. Anyway, the heat continues to be on Joe Biden. We talked, we haven't really talked a whole lot about this rape allegation because I think most of the conservative media is, and we try to focus on a lot of the stuff that's not being discussed by the conservative media.
I don't know about anybody else, but I don't want that image in my mind.
Well, the thing is I totally get it. Tara Reid is a woman. She's had a number of people credibly substantiate what she says. She says Joe Biden pinned her up against the wall. I've got the audio, but I won't play it because we only have 3 hours every week. She says he pinned her up against the wall when she was working with him, and he digitally penetrated her. And she went and told other people about it. The media hadn't been talking about this until recently when a tape from CNN came out back years ago. A tape from when Larry King was on CNN. And Tara Reid's mother, who's now deceased, but at the time she called in to ask a question, and she mentioned that her daughter had been sexually assaulted by a well-known senator. And so that put the media into damage control. MSNBC with Zika Brzezinski on the Morning Joe program did an interview, which she seemed to hit Biden really hard on that. But if you'll notice during that interview, and I've got audio from that too, but I won't play it again in the interest of time. But if you look at that audio, or listen to that audio and watch that interview, they focus on the University of Delaware documents because he's talking about if there's any evidence of a complaint that she filed, it'll be in the National Archives. It'll be in the National Archives. And Mika Brzezinski says, well, she said that it might be in your University of Delaware documents, and why don't you just authorize a search just of that? And, he stumbles around. He didn't handle himself very well in this interview at all. And even though I think it's an arranged interview, and ultimately he kind of almost even confessed, because what he said was, he said that, after all these years, this comes up. And you got to ask yourself the question, if there's nothing to it, what is this? What do you mean by that? But what they didn't talk about in that interview was all of the substantiating people around that were able to substantiate that she did mention this assault at the time it happened. One of them was a neighbor of hers that has since come forward, and actually the neighbor is a Democrat. She's going to vote for Joe Biden. She said that on what's the name of that show? Amy, the host is Amy. It's a leftist show. I'm blanking on the name.
Amy Goodman.
Amy Goodman. Yes, on Amy Goodman's show. Yeah, on Amy Goodman's show, this woman was on as a guest, and she told her story, and the neighbor. It was mentioned. The neighbor actually came forward and said that yes, this really happened. Yes, she told me about it. Yeah, I just thought I should come forward and let it be known she is telling the truth. So she totally backed her on it. But she says I am a never Trumper and I hate Trump, and so I'm still going to vote for Biden. But yeah, it did happen. So this woman is very credible. But the media has largely ignored her story, and I know that the Morning Joe program, that was their way of dealing with it. They were coming forward and they're saying that we've dealt with it now. We drilled them on it, so we're going to go ahead and move on now. That was it. That was the one interview they've addressed it, and they didn't even ever talk in the interview about all these corroborating witnesses. And anyway, so Biden's struggling, and Biden should be struggling. What was interesting, though, even the founder of MSNBC has said that he isn't doing a very well a good enough job at defending his allegations.
The attorney representing Tara Reade is asking Joe Biden to authorize a search of his senatorial papers, which are being held at the University of Delaware. Her lawyer sent a letter to Biden today asking he immediately open up those records currently under seal. Reade claims that she filed a complaint in 1993 documenting an instance of sexual harassment during her time as a staffer for Biden. But both the Senate Secretary's office and the University of Delaware have pushed back on requests to conduct a search for that complaint. Now, when Biden first addressed Reade's allegations last week, he said he has no plans on releasing the documents. The founder of MSNBC saying Democrat candidate Joe Biden needs to start using his words better. In an interview today, Tom Rogers, who's also the editor-in-chief at Newsweek, it says Biden needs to articulate a clear and convincing message, particularly when it comes to the pandemic. But he says that Biden simply isn't there yet. Rogers noting most of Biden's interviews to this point have been soft, but he's had the perfect opportunity to articulate his message.
And I think the campaign really needs to figure out how to make sure that he is really in a position to discuss what will be the defining issue of this election in a much more compelling way than he's been able to do it to date.
Rogers argued that Biden's lack of articulation plays right into the president's critique that he's been around too long and he's too old. He suggested Biden's campaign should spend the next several weeks coaching him.
Now, what's interesting about this whole thing, Vicky, is that you have the comms director at the DNC. Her name is difficult to pronounce, but it's Xochitl Hinojosa. I had to practice that. It's got a very weird spelling. Xochitl Hinojosa. She's the DNC communications director. She just told Fox News this week that they have to have a convention because they are not officially nominating Joe Biden to take on Donald Trump. Now,
really?
That's what she said. I don't know what she meant by this, and I guess she has not. She's not clarified what she meant by it. But it said,
so they might be appointing somebody to run?
I don't know. Listen to it for yourself and see what you think.
I mean, there's a real possibility the convention does not happen, or it happens in a virtual sense. Is that correct as of today?
Well, first of all, our convention has to happen because we are not officially nominating Joe Biden in order to take Donald Trump. So our convention is happening. There is business that has to happen.
What do you think?
Huh.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's one of those things that make you go,
I can foresee electronic voting at their convention and a surprise candidate winning.
Well, and of course, some people would say, well, does that mean they're going to take Hillary Clinton out of the mothballs? I mean, I guess they're really, I can't see anybody wanting Hillary Clinton. I don't know what kind of rabbit they're planning on pulling out of their hat, if in fact they do pull one out. But it was one of those things that kind of threw me for a loop, because I don't see any other way you could interpret that.
Maybe they'll pick Ocasio Cortez.
Yeah, if they really want to lose, I don't know. Maybe the Democrats love her. You got me anyway. Chicago Mayor Lori-Lightfoot. This woman really is a lunatic. I got some audio from Jason in Utah. Strikes again. He sent me a lot of stuff. One of the things that he pointed me to was this little fancy little clip. He says, you can add this to your show open, Darren. He says, another New World Order thing. This woman is talking in a clip where it sounds to me like she's trying to consolidate her power and eliminate the influence of the aldermans. Anyway, she got in there and she's talking about how she plans to reorganize the city government and how she's going to pull it off. And she wants people put in there that are loyal to the New World Order.
I'm going to consult with some of the aldermen who have been supportive of the campaign about, I'm very clear on it, and I know some of them have a very different view, but I'm very clear that it's got to go. I want to do it in a way that, doesn't do further harm, the quintessential throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but it's got to go. How do you do it? My thoughts are, because it's not written into law, it's just a very dominant culture. I think the only way you can do it is a couple ways. One, I'm thinking about an executive order from day one that says, in more legalese than this is not a thing. We will no longer honor this, because the way that aldermanic prerogative works is there's got to be compliance with the executive branch, because otherwise it doesn't work. So you got to eliminate that compliance, and you make it a mandate, and then you do training, particularly in the city, I'll call them licensing departments, whether it's zoning, buildings, housing will be impacted by it, planning certainly, and you pick the people that run those agencies and the deputies that are pledging allegiance to the New World Order and good governance, and then I think you have the Inspector General do some spot audits to make sure that there is real compliance. And I think you also, obviously have to engage with the dialogue with the City Council. It's not that aldermen are no longer able to...
Okay, anyway, I'm going to dump out of that. That's like halfway through the clip. But what do you think of that? She wants to put people in...
Well, she's talking about moving to a management system, and since she's saying the New World Order, that would be the global system, global to local, and they would be following the best practices that are written by these global committees.
Well,
I would be trying to round up people to tar and feather that woman and run her out of town.
Be careful. Be careful. Metaphorically.
Is that illegal, tarring and feathering?
Metaphorically speaking.
We can't do that anymore?
Well, people can do it, but we can't endorse it. We can't call for it.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't. Okay, I don't endorse tarring and feathering, but if that were to happen, I would understand.
Yes. Anyway, the point is that it's just remarkable how everything is out in the open now. I mean, they don't try to hide it. We were called conspiracy theorists for talking about the New World Order for decades. Yeah. And now all of a sudden,
that really pisses me off, because for years I researched things and discovered things and wrote about it, and names for doing it, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere. Everybody knows it as if they'd always known it, and it's bizarre, It's just bizarre.
Well, our friend Mark in Texas, back years ago, said something that has kind of stuck with me, and that is, in every movie you ever watch, what's the thing they do before they kill a person? They tell them the truth, and that's kind of stuck with me. It's like they intend.
Cherry thought.
Thank you. They intend to bring this country down, and you know what? They don't care anymore. They figure they got this thing in the bag, and I hope, and maybe it's a false placed hope, but my hope has been that this is their pride, their smugness, their arrogance, is what ultimately will lead to their downfall. They've done a pretty good job at propagandizing people and dividing the country. But if the people ever realize what's really going on and decide to unite, they could do a real good hind end whipping, if you get my drift. But it's going to take people coming together. In Illinois, speaking of coming together, and this is one movement we've been calling for, and I know finally a lot of people are starting to seemingly go that direction, because there's no end in sight for this. For some of us, it's just going to keep going on. I heard the other day at the Capitol, they're talking, maybe September for the state of Michigan. Well, then they're talking about how it's going to come back in the fall. Whatever this is, we'll have the cold and flu season, as we always do in the fall, and people will get sick, and they'll call it COVID-19. It doesn't matter if it's COVID-19 or not. So in Illinois, the businesses, they're in the same boat we are in Michigan, maybe even worse. They're opening up in defiance of Governor J.B. Pritzker's executive orders. Here's a report from Fox 2.
J.B. Pritzker threatens to use state police against businesses now reopening in defiance of his policy. Our Andy Banker is live in Alton, where county officials are bucking the governor's public health order. Andy?
And Mike, well, under the governor's 5-phase plan for reopening in the state of Illinois, this nail salon cannot open until at least May 29th. The sub shop down here, Firehouse, cannot have dine-in customers again until around mid-June at the earliest. Both are still complying with the governor's orders. Still, a nail salon in Edwardsville did reopen today after the Madison County Board of Health voted overwhelmingly to allow salons, gyms, restaurants, bars, and churches to go ahead and reopen in phases starting right away, with capacities limited to 25% in most cases through the end of the month at least, and recommendations for continued mask wearing, social distancing, and routine disinfecting. We checked multiple restaurants, gyms, and salons across the county, found just that one opening in Edwardsville. Customers there certainly do not feel like criminals, but the governor is coming down hard.
We've been going a little bit stir crazy, and this is a little bit of a stress reliever for us. We're just happy to be able to do it.
We need our shot to do it. I mean, there's so many people struggling right now that they need to get their families in order and their businesses back up off the ground.
Now, they mentioned in that piece that Pritzker is coming down hard. He's threatening counties that allow businesses to reopen early with the state police and threatening them, to pull their licenses and what have you. He says there's definitely going to be consequences if they go against his decrees.
Hi, Governor. Good Wednesday to you and to Dr. Ezike. Downstate Madison County and Adams County have both authorized their own reopenings. You sort of referenced this just now, but other than withholding federal funds, what other enforcement mechanisms are you considering, and have you ruled out sending in state police?
Well, not just federal funds that we're talking about. As I just said, the businesses that ignore the executive orders, that ignore the law, will be held accountable by our Department of Professional Regulation, and will be held accountable by any licensing body, Liquor Commission, Liquor Control Commission, and others. So there are enforcement mechanisms here that we will be using against them. And I would, again, implore the leaders of these communities not to give in to the minority of residents who are clamoring to ignore the science and the data, but instead to follow the rules, to follow the law, and most importantly, to keep the residents of your communities safe.
I'm the science and I'm the data. And what I say has to go.
For every person, well, the only people that are really talking about closing and staying safe is Fauci and all those people. But there are a lot of other doctors and scientists and so forth on the internet who are saying just the opposite.
Yeah.
So,
but only the ones that say that you have to shut your economy down and stay closed and destroy everything. Only those ones are the real scientists. It's just like the climate change argument. Only those that say doomsday is coming, we're all going to die unless you destroy your economy. Hey, do you see the pattern here? Everything's geared toward deindustrialization. That's what this is about.
Isn't that amazing?
This is an Agenda 21 move. Deindustrialization. They couldn't accomplish it. I just realized this. I'm wondering, they couldn't accomplish destroying the economy and deindustrializing through the climate change argument. That one hasn't stuck so far mainly because the weather hasn't cooperated. So now they've gone about it a different way. We're just going to do it with the virus. Anyway, here's what.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pritzker continues.
To address some of what we've been hearing lately from those who believe that we need to reopen faster than the science and the data dictates. Folks, I know this is hard. Mm-hmm. I know that people are hurting. This virus has taken many lives and destroyed many livelihoods. COVID-19 has turned our world upside down.
No, the virus didn't destroy many livelihoods. Your executive orders destroyed many livelihoods. And the other governors.
What it makes me wonder is if the state has sold all of the small businesses by proxy. and then is just using this COVID virus thing to shut them down.
Yeah, and the foreigners are going to come in here and scoop it all up.
Yeah, and that's exactly what made me think about it, because I heard last week that they were saying we need lots more foreign doctors. Remember we talked about that last week?
Uh-huh.
We need to import more foreign doctors. Well, all that would be doing is replacing the American doctors. It is an occupation. Mm-hmm. So, are they turning over small businesses using this phony virus thing as a step in the occupation of our country?
Yeah, a good question. I suspect the answer is probably yes.
Down and stolen our sense of normalcy and stability. I want this to end just as much as you do.
Oh, sure.
If I could take away the pain and the loss that you're feeling right now, I would do it in a heartbeat. But this virus is still among us. This pandemic is not over. And to pretend otherwise in a misguided attempt to reclaim what we've lost will only make this last longer. For leaders, there are no easy decisions in a pandemic. Every choice has consequences. And I know leaders across the state are struggling with these choices, and I have sympathy for them in that struggle. But what I don't have sympathy for is those so intent on disregarding science and logic, so afraid to tell their constituents what they may not want to hear, that they put more people's lives at risk. Here's what I want to say to those leaders. You weren't elected to do what's easy. You were elected to do what's right. To the small minority of businesses that choose to ignore the medical doctors and the data and to ignore your legal obligations to the residents of your communities, there will be consequences. Businesses and individual professionals that are licensed by state agencies will be held accountable for breaching public health orders. Counties that try to reopen in defiance may not be reimbursed by FEMA for damages they cause because they ignored the law. Local law enforcement and the Illinois State Police can and will take action. But there is no consequence the state could impose that is greater than the harm that you will do to your own communities. 192 Illinoisans lost their lives to this virus in the past 24 hours. 192. How is that?
Yeah, and the thing is, we know that they're calling everything a coronavirus death. So whenever they throw these numbers out, you can't believe anything they say.
Not real to you. More people will get sick, get admitted to the hospital, and die if we don't stay the course and follow the guidance the experts have provided.
Experts.
To the elected officials out there who are playing to the crowd that ignores science and carries symbols of hate, step up and lead.
The symbols of hate
now more than ever, your communities need you. Don't let them down.
Well, you know what? It makes me. Where the hell did this guy come from? We have 1,000 years of history, of written history to draw on. This virus is not the first virus ever. It's not the first illness ever to spread through a whole entire society. And yet, like with the Black Plague over in Europe survived. Some people died. It went away. But yet we're going to overturn our entire life for this virus that they suddenly out of the blue say, we've got to shut down our society because it's so deadly and so horrible, but only a very, very small percentage of people have died. It's just freaking insane.
Well, it just proves to you that it's not about the virus. It's about control.
Well, yeah.
The virus is an excuse, and they're using it to the maximum extent that they possibly can, to the point where they intend to track and forcefully vaccinate people if they can. And if you don't go along, well, you're just a persona non grata. I got one more clip from Pritz.
What additional damage, though, would be done to local communities already reeling from the economic downturn if federal funds are withheld by your administration, if regulation gets involved and takes away some of the licenses of these business owners. I mean, these are folks that are already hurting. Who bears responsibility if their hardship gets even worse?
Well, they're the ones who bear the responsibility because they're the ones who are not following the rules.
Follow the rules.
Let's be clear. What we're trying to do here is keep people healthy and safe and to reopen the economy simultaneously. And that's what the Restore Illinois plan does. Indeed, I would suggest to everybody that they take a look again at that plan, that it is more expeditious in many ways than the plan put out by the White House. But it also takes into account making sure that our healthcare institutions have the capacity to manage the people who will get sick as things reopen in the economy. If you do it too fast, what you're going to see is an overrunning of the healthcare system and, very importantly, many people getting sick, going into the hospital, ending up in ICU beds and dying.
You will obey. You will obey.
I will never obey. I will never.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Here in Michigan, our totalitarian governor continues her reign of terror. She just yanked the license of a 77-year-old barber. We talked about him before on the broadcast. He opened up his shop in defiance of her orders, and the community rallied around him. Actually, we've had people driving literally for many, many miles to get their hair cut at this guy's shop. But she just yanked his license. He's fighting it out in court.
Governor Whitmer, armed militia members are now pledging to block police from enforcing the closure of the Owasso barbershop that is open in defiance of the stay-at-home order. What are your thoughts on this and those doubting your authority to enforce these orders?
Thanks for the question. I first want to start by saying I know how frustrating this can be and tough this can be for people across our state, people that are self-isolating, people that are doing all of the right things and contributed to this decline that we've seen. But what matters most here is that we are on a trajectory where we have saved lives. What we need to do is continue what we have done. It's working. And for people that want to voice their frustration, that's fine. But I expect people to follow the law. These executive orders are not a suggestion. They're not optional. They're not helpful hints. This is an order to prevent the spread of COVID-19, which is a deadly virus, so that we can save lives. And I expect all Michiganders to comply with the law.
I expect everybody, and what I say is the law. What I say is the law.
I can't even say what I...
Yeah, as I said, we just had a protest against her on Thursday of this week. We have another one scheduled on Wednesday at noon. So if anybody happens to be in Michigan, I plan on being there. This barber, his name is Carl Mankey, by the way. He's going to be there, I hear, cutting hair at the Capitol. So if anybody needs a haircut, come on down. But he's going to be cutting people's hair right there in front of the Capitol, across the street from Whitmer's office in the Romney building. And so she can look out her window and see Carl Mankey out there cutting people's hair in defiance of what she said, and despite the fact that she pulled his license. Yeah, I mean, what kind of scumbag do you have to be to yank the license of a 77-year-old barber? Completely harmless man. You know,
is anybody
just trying to get by.
Beginning to talk about circulating a recall petition?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's way overdue. I think it should have been. They talked about it in the last protest, but I think it should have been done a lot sooner. Because everybody that's went to these protests, I mean, that should have been day one. When everybody was in their cars, on that first protest we had, people should have been going door to door, or car to car, as it was, getting people to sign the recall petition in every successive protest, because it's pointless unless you actually get signatures on the, and that's what really we have a political show on a local PBS station called Off the Record, and that was one of the things that Bill Ballinger, who's a panelist on that show, brought up, is if the legislature wanted to be effective, they could be pushing this, because we got the ballot initiative here in Michigan, they could be pushing people to sign signatures to get a measure on the ballot to vote her out. Although I don't know, she might try to use an executive order to suspend the election. I mean, it's crazy what's going on here. And and there's things, according to what was said at this last rally, she's taken measures to stop the influence of the courts. And I got to look into that a little more. But not only has she shut the legislative branch out of the equation, she's also trying to do things to stop the influence of the courts. And
that's interesting. I don't know how she would be able to do that. Actually,
I don't either. I got to, like I say, I got to look into it more. That was something that was said from the podium at the rally, and there was one attorney there, really smart lady. I forget her name, but lots of different things happening here. But she's definitely on a power trip. There's no question about it, as I think a lot of these other governors are. But I think they're coordinating their activities. I think that they are these things are coming from higher up. I believe that, and I think they're loving it because they get to be dictators. But I do think that there is a coordinated effort to try to destroy everything. And they're doing a pretty good job of it, too. Reporter asked about consequences for businesses.
Following up on that, though, Governor, there are several businesses and people who are operating in clear violation of the stay-at-home order. At what point does the administration start enforcing some of these things or compelling local law enforcement to do so? There are several local law enforcement members who have said they don't plan on enforcing this.
I've been very clear. This is these executive orders have the force of law, and we expect people to abide by them.
Okay, let me stop it right there, because that is not true. According to this attorney that spoke at the Capitol the other day, she said that the courts have the Supreme Court has heard that the fact that you can't cherry pick your law. All the laws have to be on a particular subject have to be read in conjunction with one another. What this attorney said is that the governor here is cherry-picking which laws that support what she's doing and ignoring the laws that don't. And consequently, when the legislature refused to renew her emergency power, she said that this actually expired her ability to do these stay-at-home orders. And so she's actually illegally operating right now in the state. So I think that's a very. I probably should have went and got that clip there, but this notion
it's telling me is that she doesn't understand the nature of power. You know, she really doesn't understand the nature of power. She thinks she's sitting in the governor's chair and she is the all-powerful Wizard of Oz or something, you know. But that's not really the way it works.
I don't agree. I think she understands exactly what she's doing. I think she doesn't care. I think she is going to go full steam ahead, and because really there doesn't seem to be any consequences so far. I mean, she's gotten death threats, but other than that, I mean, there doesn't seem to be any consequences. And I'm sure.
Well, there will be. I mean, you know, if
I don't know.
Think of how many people's lives she's destroyed. Is it going to be safe for her once she leaves the governor's office?
Well, that's
is it going to be safe for her to live in that state?
How safe is it for her now? And certainly we're not calling for anybody to do anything. I'm not endorsing that. I mean, I think there's other ways to handle it.
I'm not either.
I know you're not. I just have to say it, though.
I'm talking about the nature of power, and when a dictator, which she is, oversteps, things happen.
Yes.
People get angry. If you destroy a lot of people's lives, at some point they're going to come for you.
Well, see, that's the thing, is because the damage. They're focusing on all the damage. Oh, the virus can do this and the virus can do that. And they're completely ignoring the other side of the equation. The damage, most of the damage that's being caused are being caused by their supposed remedy to the situation, which is really
right. The cure being worse than the disease.
Exactly. Much, much, much worse. So anyway, continue.
Most businesses in the state have a license that is granted from the state, and they're putting themselves at risk by putting their customers and themselves at risk by opening prematurely. We know right now in Shiawassee County, we've got quite a few COVID-19 cases. We know that the hospital system is concerned, as are hospital systems across our state. We have a strategic re-engagement plan. The plans that we have executed have worked. We need to stay the course and do this in a smart way, and everyone needs to continue doing their part. The devastation from a second wave could dwarf the hardship that we've already encountered. We've made these sacrifices. Let's not make them in vain.
Well, what's this we business? You haven't made any sacrifices.
Let's everyone continue
to frog in her pocket.
Do their part so that we can move on to the next phase, and then the next phase, and get back to a new normal here in this state and get more people re-engaged.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, new normal.
Yep.
Following up on that, though, Governor.
Oops, sorry. I was going to replay that, but yeah, she said get back to a new normal in the state. I don't think that's the goal. That's not what the people want. We want the old normal back, but that's not what they're arguing for. All right, one more from her.
Governor, you said this morning on The View that the protests that we've been seeing at the Capitol could be potentially adding to...
Now, this is kind of interesting, too. She said, now the reporter's asking the question, obviously, but Whitmer, when she answers, she talks about a group that put up a geofence around the Capitol and tracked people to their homes. And she also said that the Michigan State Police are actually monitoring our conversations, those of us who went to the protest. So, I mean, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm just going on what she says.
Adding to the spread of COVID-19 as people not listen to the stay-at-home orders and congregate. What proof do you have to show that that's happening, and as well as COVID-19 spreading into rural areas because of that?
Yeah, so I think that, I saw one report. I don't have proof. I'm not following everybody home and taking their...
There you go. She doesn't have proof, so she's full of crap.
...temperatures and watching them for 2 weeks. But here's what we know. When COVID-19, the way that it spreads is person-to-person contact, that it can stay in the air for a while, that it is... when you're closer than 6 feet, not wearing masks. It is when you're touching one another. We saw a lot of that at these protests at the Capitol. And that's how COVID-19 spreads. We know it's incredibly contagious. There was a group that did a report that they had put up a geofence around the Capitol and then monitored cell phone data, and that it translates where we are seeing hot spots in rural parts of Michigan. I don't know the group. I have not vetted the data. I can't vouch for it, but I think that would not be a surprising outcome if that was the case. I don't...
No, it's interesting. Nobody follows up on this. I mean, we've got a room full of reporters, supposedly. Nobody ever asks her a follow-up question. What is this geofence thing? Can you expand on that a little bit? What do you mean by that? Are you saying that there is an organization that's somehow tracking people off Capitol property and back to their homes? But no. There's no intellectual curiosity at all. Everybody just lets it go.
Particularly want to see people congregating, period. We know that contributes to spread. But if people are going to come down and demonstrate, do it in a responsible way is what we ask.
Do you want to see MSP hand out tickets tomorrow for people not social distancing and not wearing masks?
I think the Michigan State Police is monitoring all of the conversations around this event tomorrow, that they are prepared and are working with the Attorney General. I think we've seen some joint statements today, and I believe that if there is a reason to issue a ticket, that they're prepared to do that.
What do you think of that? The Michigan State Police are monitoring
conversations of people.
That could be interpreted different ways. I mean, they could be monitoring it on social media or public places, but that's, I think they're talking about monitoring communications, private conversations
I know
on the phone.
Do things like, I know that they can throw like a virtual private network to prevent people from using their cell phones in a certain area.
Yeah.
A friend of mine lives across the street from a house that was being used as a SWAT training house. So they had, and she didn't know that it was a training exercise to start with, but they had all the police there, doing their SWAT stuff. But she tried to call out. She couldn't call out. They had the video stream blocked because she was going to record it.
Yeah, they have a lot of they can jam, but they can also use these devices that intercept the communication, so the calls still go through, but they're monitoring everything in the call. They can do that as well. And if it overpowers the cell phone tower, your cell phone will connect to their device. So it's essentially a man-in-the-middle attack. That's something that they have, and they can use that very effectively. Tell you what, we got the break. Let's take the top of the hour break. We'll continue on the other side.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order. A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is the third and final hour of Govern America, fastest 3 hours in talk radio. It continues to be the 16th of May, 2020, as we get right back into it. Tell you what, we got a phone call on the line. Let's go ahead and take the call, and then we'll cover other information. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, guys. It's me again.
Hi there.
I know it should be showing I'm calling from Georgia because I'm using my line.
It does indeed.
Anyway, got three things I wanted to comment on with regards to this. I call her a clown, where you were playing the clips.
Whitmer?
First one is this concept of a new normal.
Yes.
I instantly come to the question, if it's a new normal, how do you get back to it? Because you can't get back to anything that's new, you flippin' idiot.
Yeah, good point.
This woman is just, completely...
Well, she was. To be fair, she's not the first one that said that. A lot of these governors are just parroting things that they've been giving.
Parroting what she's already heard.
Yes, exactly.
Parroting what she's already heard.
Exactly.
That's worse, actually, because she's not doing her own thinking. She's just a talking head in the flesh.
I think what they're doing is they're given these orders from higher up, and this is what you need to implement. This is what you need to do. Take these basic guidelines, repackage them for your own state. Put your little marketing on it, like it's, Illinois they had the Restore Illinois or whatever plan. They put their own marketing branding on it, and they may tweak it here and there, make little modifications to it, but it's basically the same plan. They're all doing phased reopenings. They're all doing things a certain way, but it always involves contact tracing. It always involves the tracking, and it involves the vaccinations. So these basic tenets are in place. Go ahead.
Yeah, she's just following a script.
Yeah, exactly. Good way to put it.
The second thing is this concept that she's talking about, people need to follow the law. These executive orders that... Now, hold on a second. I've been studying law since 1986, and I have majored... I'm currently enrolled in my third college right now, which is Hillsdale College. But in all three of these different colleges, I majored in the Constitution, constitutional and natural law. And executive orders are not laws. This is what these people don't understand. There is no such thing as an executive order having the full effect of law, because an executive order is nothing but a mandate for the executive branch on what they need to do to implement the head of the executive,
right,
whether it be the president or governor or whatever. It is simply a directive to
their own cabinet
branch on how they are to act.
Exactly.
It is not law, and it has no effect on the civilian population.
But they're pointing to emergency power legislation that was put into effect, at least here in Michigan. I don't know about other states. I'm assuming it's the same there too. But they're looking at emergency powers laws that were put into effect decades earlier. And but as we've already talked about here in Michigan, apparently that's not even sufficient enough for her to be on legitimate ground, at least according to certain legal opinions. And ultimately, I guess the courts are going to have to decide whether or not she can do this. And if they side with her, I don't know what the remedy is, because I don't think this thing is ever going to end. I don't think it's ever going to end.
It's not.
Well, I don't think the legislators will give up their power.
Well, they already have, Vicky.
No.
They gave up their power when they passed these laws in the first place.
For a brief period of time, but next time.
Well, the question is, will the people give up their power? Because people are only going to put up with this for so long.
Yeah, that's the big question right there. Is are the people willing to give up their power? And the third thing is this whole concept, and I don't care. I've heard it from Inslee, I've heard it from Whitmer, I've heard it from Newsom, I've heard it from Northam, I've heard it from virtually every Democrat governor, and even a few Republican governors, that by going out these protests, you're not wearing masks, you're not social distancing. Well, social distance, that's an oxymoron in and of itself, but you're not following the rules. You're not doing this, you're not doing that. You're putting other people's lives at risk. Here's what they don't realize. And this includes Mr. Merck, the guy, the 77-year-old barber up there in Oslo, and Shelley Luther in Dallas, and the lady that owns Big Daddy's Grill, and all these others that are opening against the orders. They're not putting anyone's lives at risk or putting anyone else's health in danger who are not willing to put their own health at risk. Meaning, if I go to Mr. Carl Menk's barbershop to get a haircut,
mm-hmm.
I'm assuming the risk myself. He's not doing anything. He's giving me the opportunity. Do you want a haircut? I'll cut your hair for you. The risk is on you.
Yes.
That's what these idiot politicians don't get.
And that's the way it should be.
Anybody's lives at risk.
Well, whenever you go to a barber, it's dangerous anyway, because he's got sharp instruments. He could end up cutting your throat when he's trying to give you a shave.
Right.
He could end up cutting your ear off with his scissors.
Right. Or he could cut your bangs at an angle.
Ooh, those are fighting words, Vicky.
Realize that we as mature adults, the most fundamental right that we have, it's not even in the Bill of Rights, but it's protected under the Ninth Amendment, and it is the most fundamental right, above the right to free speech, above the right to religion, above the right to keep and bear arms. The most fundamental right we have as Americans is the right to choose for ourselves what we want. And by doing that, we individually assume all responsibility. And that's where we must stand on this issue.
Exactly.
And not waver.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
that's what you're talking about is a free society. Go ahead, Vicky.
Yeah, you know what is upsetting to me is that she is using the licensing system as a weapon. Yeah. And the thing is that licenses
Pritzker said the same thing.
For beauticians, I don't know about barbers, guys can take care of themselves, but for beauticians is an important thing because beauticians use chemicals and so forth. If they break that licensing system, which is one of the neoliberal platform issues, is, we don't need the government to issue licenses and so forth. She's putting that system at risk, which means that she's putting customers at risk because people will want to, defy the licensing laws and then perhaps get rid of the licensing laws. And then you'll start seeing people coming back with head lice, back with ringworm, things that have been, gone for a long, long time, come back.
Well, my take on that, and I understand why some things are licensed and stuff, that you deal with safety and regulation and all that, but I do think there's far too much licensing regarding things that free people should just be able to engage in commerce without asking the government for permission to do everything. And like I say, I understand the reason why a lot of this stuff has come about, but I think there's far too much of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and here's another thing, too. I mean, who are they to decide what's essential?
Yeah.
Who are they? Just because this store, this novelty shop, happens to, all they sell is knickknacks and baubles and pretty things that you can decorate and all that with. That's all. They're not essential. Well, it's essential to the people that own the business. It's essential to the people that work there, and it's essential to the people who want to go there and buy the products. Well, everything is essential.
Here's the thing. Going back to the licensing thing for just a minute, because I think that's a good discussion. Somebody who is not good at cutting hair, for instance, somebody who's not an expert at styling, or somebody who doesn't use the right kind of chemicals, if you want to say that, they're going to quickly get a reputation in the community for being incompetent.
It doesn't matter if you're the woman who went to get her hair colored or get a perm, and the beautician burned your hair so bad that you don't have any hair and burned your scalp. I don't think you realize how dangerous these chemicals are. They are dangerous.
The only problem with that is
they can burn your. Yeah,
but they could still do it though. They could still. The license doesn't stop them from being able to damage you. All it does.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Because if you get injured at a salon, and it's because a beautician didn't know what she was doing with those chemicals, you can go. File a complaint on her license.
But you could do that. You could file a complaint against the establishment anyway.
Still sue.
You could and you could sue. Yeah, that's true.
File a complaint with whom?
Well, with the Attorney General, I guess, if it's bad enough. Or you could file, like Art says, you could sue. There are remedies, but
right. Sue lawsuits. Have you priced an attorney lately?
Well,
The whole thing is that some businesses, you want them to have licenses because you want them to have a certain level of education and you want them to maintain a standard of business. Some other businesses where they have to have licenses, maybe they don't need a license because there is no specific, educational requirement.
Well,
you're doing is not going to hurt anybody if you do it wrong.
Well, we could agree to disagree on that one. Because I really think that in the absence of the licensing, I think the public would adapt. And I think they would look for qualifications. The barber, the beautician could have those qualifications on the door. Hey, look, you should come to me because I've got a degree in this, or this is why I'm an expert. This is why I have good credentials, and it could be a part of the marketing, you know.
And without any way to verify those credentials, you're left with having to trust the person and.
Well, we are ultimately
please don't solve any problems for us on the ladies' hair side of things. You know, I don't care what you guys do with your barbers.
Well,
but
we can
stay off the ladies' hair.
We can agree to disagree on that one.
Okay.
It doesn't matter anyway because they're not going to listen to me anyway.
Right.
But anyway, Art, you have anything else?
No, that was it. I was wondering, had you had a chance to look at the Cladex videos?
No, I have not. Although I am, it's on my radar. I just have been swamped. I've been working on chicken houses, and
I think you'll find it rather interesting.
Yeah, it looks very interesting. I'm very eagerly looking forward to getting into it. But
it's amazing. As I was watching it, as we went through all four parts, you put it hand in hand, side by side with the Event 201. That we talked about on this broadcast.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Everything that we've seen since this whole thing started is exactly what we see in these two events. In fact, even in the Cladex, I think it's part 3, they actually use the word social distancing. I was sitting there. Wait a minute, did she just really say that? Yeah, we'll create what's called social distancing. Absolutely amazing. And I am convinced now, looking at the timeline starting in 2005 and coming up to now, the timeline of all these things that have happened, I'm convinced that this actually was planned in advance and then put in practice, put in play. And as well, we had, who was it said, we're in the middle of a live drill.
Yeah,
also
Pompeo.
If you go to YouTube and look up...
He said live exercise, by the way.
Yeah. If you go to YouTube and look up under house arrest due to crimes committed by the CDC, there's a guy named David Martin.
Mm-hmm.
His website is davidmartin.world. He did a video on YouTube, and he does a series. It's called the Butterfly of the Week.
Okay.
And you'll want the April 27th episode. This man provides you in the description below. He provides you with all the links to all the documents, articles, everything he references. He references the U.S. Code, and he literally lays out what could be used in a court to convict all of these people, mentioning Fauci and the World Health Organization, the CDC, and he shows in the video where constitutional violations as well as legal violations have occurred. He names names, points fingers. Absolutely amazing. I'll send you guys the link later, and you can check it out.
All right, very good.
You're really impressed.
Hey, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think I watched that last week. He is good. He's really good.
Yeah, I'll have to take
he's good.
Take a look at that. Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but you know what? I was listening to a hearing last week on the virus. I think the guy's name was... He was the one that did work for the CDC, and he got sick or something. And anyway, he did say that this situation we're in is dark winter. And dark winter is that exercise that we've talked about
last week,
a couple times over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That was a live exercise.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Well, yeah, I have no reason to doubt that this was planned long in advance. And to be honest with you, it's interesting that we've adopted the Chinese model very much the same way Bannon was calling for, we need to go full Wuhan. Full Wuhan. And then certainly we pretty much did. over here. They locked the country down, and I'm not unconvinced that there wasn't coordination between the United States and China. And that could very well be the reason why they funded the research to the tune of $3.7 million that we know about. And I'm asking the question, how much do we not know about? Because I'm sure this is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I've been studying globalization of our government. That's what I've been studying, what they've done to our country. And the problem is that there is one part of our government, the State Department, the CIA, the FBI has been heavily involved in it. The medical part of it, or public health part of it, they have all been globalizing themselves. And so they've development of this global system that includes China. So basically, they're the ones carrying out these international agreements that have sold us out to China, while in our environment, just in the United States, we talk about the United States as in isolation,
right? As
if this international system really doesn't exist hardly. They might mention it from time to time, but
well, they don't want people to know.
When economists talk about our economy, they are talking about like the four walls or the four borders, in which our country exists, as if there is no world outside of this, and as if these people in in agencies that are bifurcated into the international and the domestic, as if none of that exists.
Yeah.
So how can anybody understand?
Boy, Skype is
within
really
the four walls of the United States? You can't.
Yeah. Moving along here, just to keep things flowing. Art mentioned Washington State. Governor there is Jay Inslee. Some of the stuff that they're talking about in Washington State, Vicky, is really alarming. In fact, Ammon Bundy put out a video. I don't know if you saw it, but he talked about some of that as well. In fact, I'll put Ammon Bundy's video in the show notes, but I managed to find the original too. They're moving to the next phase of this whole thing, which involves contact tracing.
We're learning more tonight about what the governor says needs to happen before Washington can start reopening the economy. Health experts with the state are calling for massive statewide testing as well as a system for contact tracing. Camera 7's Dee Dee Sun explains.
The Department of Health says when we slowly start reopening and reintegrating, contact tracing is going to be critical. The patient doesn't set off another major round of outbreaks. Everyone's trying to figure out how to best reopen the economy. Inslee's plan, making sure there's enough testing and contact tracing before loosening stay-at-home restrictions. Today, the governor said those two pillars are not in place yet.
Will we be able to restrain this beast to prevent this spike coming back by using testing and isolation? So far, we are not at that point.
But new data from the state shows our curve is flattening significantly. Take a look at the big drop in the number of COVID patients getting hospitalized daily.
Washingtonians are doing a really good job right now.
The concern is when restrictions loosen, one COVID patient could set off another spike of cases. That's why Inslee says having enough testing to know quickly who is sick is critical. The governor announced today a big order of supplies is coming to Washington, but that long term, the state will need federal help.
We do have a substantial order of swabs that we believe are headed our way in the million swab magnitude. I have, on repeated occasions, urged the president to use his authority to increase the production of these swabs.
In hand with that is contact tracing. The state's health secretary says there must be a way to track down every person who might have been exposed when there's a new case.
We need to be able to have a system that can quickly identify folks who are COVID positive and basically get them to stay home rather than the entire population.
The state already has 700 people trained to track cases, but will have a massive team of 1,500 contact tracers ready by mid-May. Washington will be activating 500 members of Washington's National Guard to help with this new mission in the next few days.
That is the strategy. I believe there's a reasonable chance that it will succeed because it's based on science.
As for whether Washington State will use various apps being developed by different companies that relies on your phone's Bluetooth to see who you've been in contact with, Washington State says they've talked with several companies, but for now, they don't have plans to use that tech yet. In Seattle, Dee Sun, Cairo 7 News.
Okay, so notice they talked about how the Washington National Guard was going to be involved in the process. Governor Jay Inslee outlined some of the stuff that they plan to do for families, to families, I'll say. He said that people will have to isolate, and if they can't or won't, there will be isolation centers for them, Vicky.
Well, like China's work camps.
Yes, isolation centers. Like I say, Ammon Bundy put out a video about this, but I did manage to locate the original as well, so both of those videos will be in the show notes. But what Governor Jay Inslee is talking about here sounds an awful lot like a roundup to me.
I wanted to talk just a little bit more about the isolation for families involved in this. So that means the household, the family, will need to isolate with them. And if a person cannot do that, there will be other isolation facilities for them away from their household.
Okay, so what are the question then becomes, if somebody's deemed to have tested positive, or if they've deemed to have come into contact with somebody who is positive, because see, you don't have to be positive. You just have to be around somebody who is positive, at least according to what they think. I mean, it doesn't even have to be proven. They can just say you were near somebody who was positive, and who are you to say that that's not so? I mean, if you go out in public, as most people do, you're around a lot of people. So what this looks like to me is just a recipe for rounding up whoever the hell they want to round up and putting you in a 14-day lockup or longer.
Kind of like a variation on rounding up the Jews in Nazi Germany.
So the question then becomes, what is going to happen to the children? And as Ammon Bundy pointed out, because he was saying that on his video that he didn't believe it when they came out and said that they have places for children, quarantine centers set up in the state for the children. He says, I didn't believe that. He says, I couldn't believe that they would actually go that far as to take away the children from the parents. He says, so I told the person who told me that you got to provide me some proof. And he says, they provided me the evidence. And so I have the evidence here as well. There was a posting on government jobs, the website governmentjobs.com. DCYF Social Service Specialist COVID-19. It said this listing closes on May 11th, 2020. The posting, by the way, has since been taken down. I did manage to find it on an archive site, and I went and backed it up myself and turned it into a PDF file, which will also be into the show notes as well. But it's a salary of $4,829 to $6,496, multiple locations statewide in Washington, and it says agency internal, non-permanent, Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and it's got the job number there and the closing date and all that, and it says description, DCYF Social Service Specialist 3, COVID-19 care, internal only. And it says DCYF is seeking current DCYF employees in King, Snohomish, and Benton counties to volunteer to supervise and support children and youth in emergency quarantine centers. While this is a voluntary effort, you will be compensated for ranges approximately 20% above your current base salary while performing these duties, and return to your normal position and salary once concluded. We are looking for current DCYF Social Service Specialists 3s to care for children who are either COVID-19 positive or who may have been exposed to COVID-19. There are 3 locations, and they say Cedar Springs Camp, the Visitation Center at, and they give the address, Seattle, Washington, or Bethel Church on Shockley Road in Richmond, Washington. Staff who are vulnerable to the virus should not volunteer for this duty. Some of what you'll be doing: work scheduled shifts on a 24/7 basis, 12-hour shifts with 4 days on, 3 days off, then 3 days on, 4 days off. Responsibilities include supervising social service specialists, providing direct care and supervision, assessing and responding appropriately to meet children's needs, and engaging in various educational or social activities with residents. Who should apply? Current DCYF staff who are social service specialists. And they give you more information. How do I apply? Supplemental information. Anyway, the point is that this is an actual job posting on governmentjobs.com. As I said, don't look for it on that website now because they've taken it down. But I have an actual backup and archived page from that site and the PDF file from it as well. This was actually posted on ZipRecruiter as well, according to Ammon Bundy. So they have actual quarantine centers set up for, and what comes to my mind, Vicky, is that list of FEMA executive orders. You remember that?
Vaguely. When was that?
Well, they've been going on. They were actually for a while. Originally, it was 1962. John Kennedy signed a group of executive orders which would empower FEMA in the event of some kind of natural disaster. The one that came to my mind when I was reading that was the one, Executive Order 11,000, seizure of all American people for workforces under federal supervision, including the splitting of families if the government finds it necessary. I mean, there were executive orders which entailed basically every aspect of society: seizure of all communications media, seizure of all electric power, fuels, minerals, public and private, seizure of transportation, including personal cars, trucks, vehicles of any kind, and total control of highways, seaports, and waterways. But 11,000 was seizure of all American people for workforces under federal supervision, including the splitting of families if the government finds it necessary. So,
people, they've made Kennedy a martyr because he was assassinated, but Kennedy actually was participating in the New World Order.
Yeah.
He's the one that created the...
He was the one that created what?
USAID.
Okay.
He put together the money and the people for economic development in South America, which is the ultimately the system that is trying to consume our country.
Yeah.
The system of elimination of borders for commerce.
Well, Kennedy was, like many of these people, he was a mixed bag. I know, he withdrew the air support for the Bay of Pigs invasion. That really pissed off the CIA, and that's probably why they murdered him. And what was interesting is, and a lot of people have different theories about it, but what's interesting, though, is that you have George Herbert Walker Bush, who was the head of the CIA. And he got up at Ford's funeral, and you can probably still find this video out on YouTube. He spoke and gave a eulogy at Ford's funeral. And when he got to the part, it was very bizarre. He talked about how the Warren Commission will always be the definitive source for what really happened, despite what those crazy conspiracy theorists say about John F. Kennedy, JFK's assassination. The Warren Commission will always be the definitive source because Ford signed off on it. Okay? But when he got to that part, he laughed.
Sticking to it.
He laughed. He chuckled when he got to that part. It was very inappropriate for a funeral. But that's George Herbert Walker Bush. Incredible. Yeah.
I don't know when the last president was that actually worked for the American people and not for the people building the international system.
The beast system. Absolutely.
The beast.
Certainly nothing in our lifetime, I can tell you that. But anyway, last week we were talking from the Clinton Global Initiative. And we had a couple of things that we shared from that. I had 2 more clips that we didn't get to last week from that. So I guess Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin was one that we didn't get to. This woman is really terrible, too. She talks about the capabilities of governments need to prevent a surge.
I think it's very complicated because you have to open not just locally but regionally and statewide and be looking at what other areas are doing, because we are a country that travels, and every new introduction of a virus in a community can cause an upswing like we've seen in Singapore. The researchers believe that, as much as 80% of the virus we have in our community came from a single transmission. So you have to be really grounded in the science and the health. And I think we have to do exactly what the professor was saying, is we have to be able to do those things we didn't do that led to this crisis. We have to be able to identify who has the virus through very good testing. We have to be able to contact trace. We have to be able to isolate and quarantine. And so we have to have that structure in place, where I think there's no one in the country right now that has that capability. We certainly don't have it in Seattle or in Washington State. And then on the other side, you have to be thinking, what are those sectors in the economy that you can reopen more safely so that you still limit the amount of transmission of the virus? And what are the social things you still have to do, whether it's wearing a mask or social distancing when you're not at work? All of these things, I think, have to work in conjunction.
Now, these are powers, of course, that they've never had before. Now that they've had them, will they give them up? Are they going to go away after the virus goes away? But no, the virus will never go away, to hear them tell it. Oh, we've got the science.
Right.
But anything they say, they're going to say it's science.
We have flu season every year. There you
go.
So it will never go away. So
yeah, it's not going away, and that's the problem. Now that they've learned that they can lock the country down, are we ever going to have an economy that they don't micromanage and turn the dial up and down, to quote the metaphor that my governor here in this state has used? This is a dial. This isn't a switch that you turn off. This is a dial that we turn up and down. And that's going to continue to be the case.
I'm hoping that people in Idaho have more backbone than that.
Now listen to what she says next. This is, again, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin.
So, Chelsea, I will say that everyone, what we can do to get through this, I agree that young people can help carry us through this. And we've all seen the tragedy play out on a family-by-family basis, a community basis across the globe. And it's, the word unprecedented is used so many times, and this is an unprecedented event in history. But I think the thing that would be most tragic is if we did not learn the lessons that we've seen here, the inequities that we've seen play out through this pandemic. And that's what the young people are going to have to do most, your students and students across the world, to make sure that as we come out and we rebuild society by society, that they are the force that makes sure that all of these inequities that we see now in glaring...
Did you catch it? Rebuild society by society?
Yes.
As we rebuild. We rebuild. I want to play that again. This is not an accidental statement that she makes here. They're talking about rebuilding. In other words, if you're going to if you're going to rebuild something, you have to first tear apart the old, right? I mean, that's exactly what they do when they're putting in a new Walmart. They'll take the wrecking ball to the old buildings that were there, and they'll destroy before they build. And that's exactly what they're doing here.
To our society, the whole, one could say that that's why I started researching, is because I saw that our government had turned against our people when you import foreigners to take American jobs, you have betrayed your own population.
Absolutely.
So really, when you extrapolate that through, they were destroying our society.
Yes, absolutely.
To make sure that as we come out and we rebuild society by society, that they are the force that makes sure that all of these inequities that we see now in glaring relief, that we actually do something about them going forward. And that will only happen with the activism and energy that we've seen the youth do, like in climate and other areas. And so my urging is help all you can through this, but we are now in a world marathon where we really have to reshape who we are as a society across the globe.
And there it is again. A world marathon where we have to reshape who we are. I mean, you talk about revolutionary, they're just coming right out and saying it.
Yeah.
This is what this is really about. I said early on this broadcast that I thought that this is what we were being transitioned into a new system. And here we are. I mean, they're just blatantly, and we see from National File, Contact Tracing Group, that was, by the way, those clips were from the Clinton Global Initiative, who's all in on all of this stuff, because we played all that audio from last week. Well, from National File, Contact Tracing Group, funded by Soros and Gates, has Chelsea Clinton on the board. They say Partners in Health was recently selected by Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker to conduct coronavirus contact tracing, and I think we know by now what that is. The group is already training and employing hundreds of contact tracers. Some citizens fear the potential for mass surveillance by contact tracing, especially in light of Democratic-introduced bills in Congress to authorize contact tracing at individuals' residences. I think we're talking about HR 6666, which we talked about last week. Partners in Health involvement will not assuage many fears, considering that the group has received funding from George Soros and Bill Gates organizations and counts Chelsea Clinton on its board of trustees. Partners in Health lists George Soros' Open Society Foundations as an official partner, along with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Partners in Health lists Open Society Foundations on its 2015 annual report as a supporter to the tune of $1 million or above, along with the Gates Foundation. Chelsea Clinton serves on Partners in Health Board of Trustees according to its 2019 annual report. It goes on from there. This article will be in the show notes as well. They talk about the 2007 tuberculosis outbreak in Africa. But anyway, the point is that these same critters who were involved in all of this stuff before they're all working together. It's the billionaires club. It's the plutocracy. It's the oligarchs, the rich billionaires are calling the herd. They've decided that we need to be population controlled. You were going to say something?
Yeah, and they all have, the organization is that businesses have their own foundations that then present themselves as grassroots, but whatever it is that they are working towards is actually for the profit of the corporation, but it's presented as a charitable endeavor. So they get money from both sides. They collect money from all around, but they're really a lobbying organization, a lobbying and a perception management organization. It is so rotten and corrupt to the core, absolutely rotten and corrupt to the core. And it's this public-private partnership between government, nonprofits, and business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned Jason had sent me a lot of information. That was one of the things he sent me. And another thing is this U.S. Department of Defense. This is on defense.gov. DOD awards $138 million contract enabling pre-filled syringes for future COVID-19 vaccine. This was a statement by Lieutenant Colonel Mike Andrews, of the Department of Defense spokesperson. Today, the Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced a $138 million contract with, get the name of this company, Vicky, APIject. APIject.
Ject, J-E-C-T.
Yes, and so instead of inject, it's API, which is an API is what is it called? Application
Programming interface.
Yeah, there you go. Application programming interface. Exactly. So, like, if you want to program something, this is the. So, let's think about this for a second. They're going to inject people with needles that come from a company that is named APIject. In other words, Application Programming Interface, JECT. Mm-hmm. Are we being injected with an API?
Well, that's
I'm just throwing the question out there because it's kind of weird. If you go to their website, which is APIject.com, APIject.com, it says introducing the the BFS pre-filled syringe. It's time to improve how we inject medicines and vaccines. Ultra low cost, single use safety, rapid scalability. Okay, so they go on about that. And the guy that is actually one of the guys that founded this company was the guy who founded. Was it Priceline? I think it was Priceline.com. And he was one of the people. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the homepage, what jumped out at me, because they talk about BFS pre-filled syringes are ideal for pandemic response. It's single-use plastic instead of the glass, I guess. They talk about how good their syringes are and all this stuff and how scalable they are. But on the bottom of the home page, it says a digital snapshot for every injection. It says whether health officials are running a scheduled vaccination program or an urgent pandemic response campaign, they can make better decisions if they know when and where each injection occurs. With an optional RFID/NFC tag on each BFS pre-filled syringe, APIject will make this possible. Before giving an injection, the healthcare worker will be able to launch a free mobile app and tap the pre-filled syringe on their phone, capturing the NFC's tag's unique serial number, GPS location, and date and time. The app then uploads the data to a government-selected cloud database. Aggregated injection data provides health administrators an evolving real-time injection map. What do you think of that?
And what is in that vaccine? Does it have nanoparticles in it? And depending on who got that particular vial, maybe they will activate those nanoparticles to eat your lungs.
You gotta wonder.
Or to attack your organs or something. Nobody better come near me with those vials of vaccines.
Well, I'm just blown away by the name of this. Just the name of the company itself, APIject. Unbelievable.
Everything is like a joke in your freaking face.
Exactly. Yeah, naming these bills 6666 and having the, like we talked about with that patent on Microsoft, which was 06, in the publication number ended in 060606. It is. It's like they're rubbing it right in your face. If they were trying to quell fear, they certainly are doing the exact opposite of what they would need to do to reassure the public that what they're doing is for their own real benefit. Unbelievable. We got a couple calls on the line. Let me go ahead and go to the phones. And first of all, let's go to Washington State. And hello, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Yes. Hi.
There's a YouTube channel, Lift the Veil. He had a caller in a couple weeks ago that this guy has received the contact tracing training, and he had no intention of actually being employed doing that, but just as kind of an infiltrator.
Good.
He did take the training, but see, the problem is the Lift the Veil is down in California. He should know what communitarianism is, but he refuses. He doesn't choose to not put it in his head, because we've attempted so many times to say, what you're talking about is communitarianism, but you won't use the word. Why is that? Well, it's not by accident. Anyway,
I will interject real quick just to give, I don't know this guy and I don't know what he's about, but I will say a lot of people don't know about communitarianism and they don't understand it. I would say the majority of people are like that. So,
Darren, did you get that clip of Governor Newsom saying communitarianism?
Yeah, we played it on the show. We played it on the show last week.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Good.
So anyway, go ahead.
So that clip that Vicky's referring to, I have queued up. It takes 2 minutes long. Could I play that really quick and then make a brief comment?
Yeah, but it probably would be better if I played it from my end, if I can find it real quick. But I'll tell you what, go ahead and do yours, because it'll take me a moment to find it. Hello?
Yeah.
You're having trouble?
Floundering a little bit.
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and make your comment, because time's getting away from us here.
Moral authority that's being expressed every single day. We spend so much time talking about people in positions of formal authority, people with titles, governors, mayors, congressmen, presidents. But at the end of the day, the most extraordinary leaders are people like Chef Jose that don't wait to be something to do something. And what he has done at scale, not asking for permission, just forgiveness, to meet this moment is really inspiring. And I think perhaps the most important lesson that I learned in my life, and I hope a lesson that can be absorbed in the young people watching, is their capacity to be leaders and not wait around, for position and title, but to exercise your capacity in your neighborhood by just lifting out and reaching out and help lift somebody else up. And I think that is what is so inspiring at this moment. It gives me just absolute hope and optimism. And I don't say that lightly or flippantly. I mean that at the core of my soul. I have been just mesmerized by the sense of communitarianism.
Yep.
So what we did was send that to Nikki Rapana, of which both of you know.
Okay.
She responded on her Facebook, and this Breiser character that broadcasts on Mondays out of the UK from Ireland, he read her response on air on Monday on, I can't remember the name of the Graham Hart show on Monday. So what I'm trying to get across is we need to focus on countering this communitarian nightmare. What Breiser was saying is, when they come pound on your door, and it's these trained young people that are trained in communitarian code speak, you are not going to be able to have a discussion with them because you don't know what all of these words that Nikki laid out in her book. You're not going to be able to have a conversation because, you think you're part of the community. You are not.
Yeah.
So,
well, they're all indoctrinated to the point where they just know what they think they know. And I don't know that you can have much of a conversation with them anyway.
And
I don't intend to engage them in conversation. I intend to throw them off my property. And
okay, well, the National Guard who is in their 20s, you're going to be having...
Well, you know what? If it's my time to go, it's my time to go. That's the thing, because we're coming down to the point where at some point we have to draw the line. And I don't know, where that line for everybody, it's different maybe. But at some point, when they bring the battle to your front door, that's where, it doesn't get much more personal than that. They're talking about separating families. So I don't know that we can explain communitarianism to the young people of our country when they come to our door apparently with guns. I'm assuming the National Guard is going to be armed.
Consider that it's Nazi Germany, 1939 or something like that, and they're coming to your door. Nazis are coming to your door, because that's what I'll be thinking about if they come to my door.
Listen, I appreciate the call, and I agree with you in principle. People do need to get up to speed and educated on communitarianism, because that's what we're living right now. That is what we're living right now. But I unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to move on. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Missouri now and take the next call. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yeah, Darren and Vicky, Sam calling, and something rather peculiar that I thought I'd run by you. And in fact, I'll try to see if I can find it and send it over to you. One of the shows that we carry during the week comes from St. George, Utah, and they have a little news break at the top of the hour, very brief news break. But comment came up about the coronavirus there, how the coronavirus just seemed to pop up and didn't originate from outside the area. And I turned to Trish, and my first comment was, I said, okay, if we're supposed to believe this thing exists, where'd it come from, outer space?
Yeah.
That's rather peculiar, because when they start saying, well, it originated here in the county, then how can it... Okay, we're supposed to believe that it came from China. Now they're saying that, well, this didn't appear to come from outside the area over there. And, of course, as you know, words and things mean things. And so that was the first thing I thought of. And this is why I'm coming back to the whole conclusion on this whole thing, that I'm not saying there isn't something going on out there with some people, but we're always awash in viruses and stuff. I'm beginning to think more and more that COVID-19 is just nothing more than a name they've given to throw out there to get everybody in fear, just so that they can do exactly the stuff you guys are talking about. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't stuff going on. We have a flu season every year that takes out a lot of people. But the more stuff I see in this, and the more I look into this, the more I'm coming down to the conclusion that, like you guys, they're just playing this up. And this I'll see if I can find it. It was over at stgeorgenews.com out of St. George, Utah, is where they report all this stuff from. So I'll see if I can find it. But it was in their newscast. And so what are we supposed to believe then? It either came in from the outside or something, or they're just making it up just to keep the numbers artificially high. And, of course, most people would never think to question whether where it came from, really, in this case.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That is happening in Twin Falls, too. We didn't have any cases, and then, all of a sudden, now we have a number of cases, and they're talking about I don't know if they've set up the vaccination places or testing places or whatever, but in Idaho, first it was over in Blaine County, which is where Sun Valley is. We talked about that. That's where all the tech and media giants go every summer. So that would be a place where you would have actors that would play parts. But now it's suddenly moved to Twin Falls. And so whatever it is that they're doing here in Twin Falls.
Well, an interesting thing, too, is that the Rockefeller Foundation, and I didn't really have time to get into this report like I wanted to, so we'll have to cover it next week. But on April 21st, 2020, the Rockefeller Foundation puts out National COVID-19 Testing Action Plan, Pragmatic Steps to Reopen Our Workplaces and Our Communities.
Isn't that interesting?
So they're all in. The same group, by the way, it was the Rockefellers that put out the Commission on Population Control in 1972. If you recall, in the following year, we had the Roe versus Wade decision from the Supreme Court. So the Rockefellers, very much monopolistic group, company, group, family, and so this is a war, folks. This is a war by the ultra-rich on the rest of us.
Right, Rockefeller's war, Rockefeller and Carnegie. And you know what? Everything that we've been blaming on the UN, I don't think came from the UN. it went to the UN, and it came from the Rockefeller Foundation and probably the Carnegie Ford Foundation, the Gates Foundation, all of these
foundations. Yeah.
We have nonprofits that have political objectives to destroy our country. I'm really curious about. I would like to know.
Yeah.
Inquiring minds want to know.
We're just about out of time. We're going to be off the air here shortly. But
whoops.
Sam, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
You bet.
I agree with you 100%. We got to go, unfortunately. In the waning moments of the broadcast, since so many times we leave the listeners on a negative note, well, with a sour look on their face. Trump was interviewed by Fox News, the Maria Bartiromo, or whatever her name is, and anyway, he was naming the. I thought it was somewhat of a humorous thing. He was naming the people that are going to be in charge of his program, Operation Warp Speed. Okay. And so here's a real short clip for you.
Operation Warp Speed's chief scientist will be Dr. Mosef Slowy.
So it's called Warp Speed, and he put a guy in charge of it whose name is Slowy.
See, that's one of those name jokes. I see that all the time, and I know it's like a script.
It's very bizarre. Only the government. Only the government. Oh, for some reason my clothes music isn't working.
I don't think we have a real government. We have an acting troupe.
Well, that's weird. This computer froze up. Okay. Well, let's try this thing then. All right, folks, we're going to go. Thanks for tuning in.